This is Paul Breran from tinkertry.com, and you could probably tell I'm rather excited to finally have my mitts on the vSphere bits. You'll notice that my Windows 10 is so new I haven't even turned on file extensions. So let me make sure you can see that it's actually an ISO that I'm showing you. There we go. We want to turn this ISO into a bootable USB flash drive. So how are we going to do that? Well, this article. Rufus is a handy utility to do this. And on tinkertry.com, I've already written about that. It's been rather popular. So we need to download Rufus. Okay, it's done. Close the browser. Now Rufus here, what is it going to do for us? Well, you'll see. When we double click and launch it, it wants access to the hardware, so we have to say yes to user access control. And now it sniffs out my USB key, a blank one that I've inserted, 16 gig in size. So what Rufus will do is change this blank USB key into bootable media that becomes our ESXi installed target as well. You're going to see that covered as we stick this USB key in a server. Now that Rufus is running, we want to point to the ISO. So now Rufus knows the ISO that we're about to use. You'll see the volume label actually changed accordingly. And there's nothing else we need to do other than click Start. I will point out it says MBR scheme and FAT32. All those are defaults. If you've moved your Rufus settings, you might want to double check and put those back again. Click on Start, and the very first time you run Rufus, it talks about this file it wants to download. We say yes, and now we click OK. It's going to warn me that it's about to destroy all data on the USB key. And we'll just wait for it to finish. Okay, you can see the word done at the bottom, and it says it took 1 minute and 25 seconds. If this computer was equipped with a USB 3.0 port and we're using USB flash drive, then it could be done in as little as like 15 or even less seconds. All that aside, doesn't really matter. We've got the boot media made. So we want to click on Close, and then eject it properly, like you're always supposed to do, right? Okay, so now I'm putting the USB key in my server, and it's time for me to establish a video connection to that system. What I'm going to do is get you an out-of-band way to see everything that's going on. Okay, now the server is powering on. You'll see the video flash. It's pretty normal. And I'm going to want to check the boot order of the server in the BIOS settings. So I hit delete on this particular BIOS to get into it, the configuration. You may have UEFI BIOS or something different. That's okay. Some of the most basic settings are about the CPU. This video is not intended to be comprehensive and a look at how every computer can install VMware, vSphere, ESXi. It's really just meant to show the basics of getting going. But you'll want to make sure Intel virtualization technology is on and no execute memory protection. Those two pieces you want on. Now my focus is on the boot order. You'll see the USB flash drive that I have installed, the 16 gig, is at the top of the sequence. So in my case, no changes were made. I'm just going to exit, and it should begin booting off of this USB flash media that we just made. And there it is, ESXi 6 standard installer. If we hit nothing, in 5 seconds it just starts. And in another few seconds, it begins the installer boot. So I'll point that out. We built an installer media. It's the same as if you had put in a DVD or CD-ROM with an image of the ISO on there. Okay, so bootable DVD, this will act the same. What's unique though is it's loading into memory, read only, right, because it thinks it's on a DVD or CD. But what's cool is it'll give us the USB key that we're on as an install target and obliterate it. So it knows, in some sense, it's a read-write target, and we'll be able to nuke the contents that are on there that we don't need. All we needed them was for this first boot. When we install to the same USB flash drive, it now becomes the same as a hard drive would act when you install ESXi to a hard drive, or an SSD, or an SD card. So I'll let this boot finish. I'll go ahead and probably speed up the video at this point. Okay, it's ready for us to continue. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Enter key and hit F11 to accept the EULA. Now it scans for all potential installed targets. In my case, I do have local VMFS data stores. I don't want to accidentally nuke one. But look how easy that is. The SanDisk, whoops, looks like this machine has 2 inserted at the moment. That's all right. I want to install to the HP. So in general, you're going to find in yellow the media you're going to be trying to install to, right? So usually you don't have to hit up and down arrow at all, but you do want to confirm that whatever brand you bought, in my case, this particular video is using an HP 165, a 16 gig flash drive, you want to make sure that's what you choose from this list. So I'm hitting F11 to confirm, and off it goes. Now I just want to point out, previous videos have confused people when I show this KVM over IP. Think of this black window in the upper left corner as if I'm in front of the server with a local VGA cable going to a monitor and aiming a video camera at it. It's not virtual, it's a real physical server. You saw me in the BIOS of a Core i7 Z68 motherboard. So there's nothing virtual about it. I'm installing this hypervisor on the bare metal. Okay, now we have success. It says the somewhat peculiar prompt, remove the installation disk before rebooting. In my case, I don't. I just want to hit enter. And of course, we already checked the BIOS that it's set to boot from this USB flash drive. So it's just going to work. There's no media to eject or worry about physically popping out of the front of a server. No motorized trays. This eliminates all of that. Frankly, I don't even leave my DVD burner plugged into my ESXi host anymore, saving a few watts in the process. Notice it says loading VMware ESXi, not installing. So that is a good sign. Now we just wait for the boot to complete. I speed up the video again. All right, so a DHCP server has fed me an IP, but it's a server. So I'm going to want to fix that. So I hit F2. This is no different than your usual initial installation configuration. If you look at the clock at the bottom right corner, it's only 14 after the hour. Now it's 15 after. I'm going to go to Configure Management Network. Obviously, we found a network adapter, so I'm not going to fiddle with that setting right now. I'm just going to head on over to IPv4. Down arrow twice, set static, and right arrow my way over to here. This is the IP address I use in my home lab. Obviously, you very well use something different. Very likely use something different. Now for DNS, it's just a little trick here. You can use Google DNS in this case, or your home router. It's fine. I'm going to keep the lab super simple and make as few changes as possible. I'm going to leave all that alone. I'm even going to leave localhost alone. We're going to go with a strictly IP config for the ESXi host and the VCSA, or vCenter server appliance. So we're going to leave custom suffixes alone as well. This is something my router appended. We can try to delete those. You may have, this is a home consumer router. It's going to try to appending stuff. You may or may not have luck with leaving that blank. Notice we go back in, it did leave them blank now, but when we apply the settings, this is where we find out how it's gone. Say Y for yes. And now with any luck, we're able to ping this guy. There we go, our first ping test. So we're done here with the local interface. Just hit escape our way out and let it sit like this. Minimize that. All right, next. Continue the website and download vSphere client. Now that comes from a public URL. And let's stick it right with those other files. I'll hover the mouse over that. If you see that URL at the bottom left, that hasn't changed. It's typical for it to use the public URL. My bandwidth is quite good. If you have a poor bandwidth connection, or you may have a wish to download this vSphere client directly from the same place you got the hypervisor, you can probably get the client. So you don't necessarily need to download it this way after the hypervisor is there, since it is a public URL. All right, so we actually already have that folder open. And now we can see the client has shown up. So that is our next step. I can close that browser. And let's launch the client. Again, going with English, and next, default install. Now we simply wait for the install to complete. Okay, the install finished. Let's remove any clutter. We don't need that anymore. And we don't even need that folder view. So now we have nothing opened other than vSphere client. I'm going to go ahead and pin that to taskbar. That it acts exactly the same as it would on Windows 8 or 8.1. Let's launch it for the first time. Install certificate and then click Ignore. And we're in. Now you may want to apply a license depending upon your situation. But this is good. I've gotten in. I can look at my specs on my machine. I can see I'm booted. I can even see some local VMFS data stores. All right, and you'll notice what it did to the name, localhost.localdomain. All right. Well, what's next? Well, remember vCSA appliance. Things have changed a little bit about that, the way that's handled. So if we look here, you'll see you have an ISO file. Two of them actually. The hypervisor that we just installed, 350 meg approximately. Then this big vCSA one, but it's ISO. Isn't vCSA supposed to be an OVA file, right? Well, let me show you. What we can do is simply double-click the ISO, and in Windows 8, 8.1, or 10, it'll just auto-mount it. It's drive D in this case. Pretty simple, right? Okay, now important before we begin that wizard, there's the step of installing the client integration plugin. This way your browser knows what to do with this installer we're about to kick off. Okay, go up a level and then mounted ISO again. Now we're ready for VCSA setup. Click Allow, and there we go. Install the appliance. Accept the license agreement. And now it wants the IP address of the ESXi host we just created. And of course the password, which was a fairly complex password, although you can get away with a pretty simple password in hypervisor still. Not so much for the appliance though, and that you'll see coming up here. Okay, we get the usual SSL fingerprint stuff. Now it's actually hitting the ESXi host for the first time. And this is what I was saying about complexity. Upper, lower, numbers and letters, and an upper ASCII character. Now, embedded platform services controller. I'm just keeping that mouse right over next. Just going to keep hitting next. Create a new SSO domain. This can match the password we gave in the previous screen if you'd like. Stick with the prompts. Instead of getting fancy, go with what it suggested. In my case, tiny is good. Small lab, absolutely appropriate. Hit next. Okay, now it wants to know where I want to put this. So I'm going to put it on an SSD for speed. And this one's SATA 3. But I definitely want to turn on thin disk mode. I don't want to use up much room on my precious SSD. I like that new feature. Okay, use embedded database. Network settings. Static. Now, trying to get SSO and all that working, if you put a name in here and you don't have proper DNS with forward and reverse lookups, I would highly recommend just sticking with IP for simplicity for now. I might come out with a video later with something a little more sophisticated for a home lab. So 10.10.1.1 for me, and I'm serving to go with Google DNS again. All right, carefully proofreading my screen here. Let's scroll down. NTP I want, or not. I'm going to actually go with synchronize with the ESXi host where I already have NTP syncing going. Or I'm going to configure that actually. We just installed that. All right. SSH, you don't want to turn that on. I've had some problems with that. You can turn that on later. And there's my summary screen. Click finish. Let's see what happens. So it took a while, over 10 minutes. I'll have to look at the clock again, but it's fine as long as it works. Completing final setup as it teases me, and hopefully completes without incident. Okay. Excellent. Notice it warns you how to sign in that first time. Go ahead and put that in the clipboard and click on the link that it gives me. Continue to this website. Turn off always ask for the client integration. Paste that in. Ta-da, our drum roll moment. So if you have a license, you'll want to do that. That's important. Okay, we're good. I'm going to go to home. So we have licensing done. What's the first thing we want to do? Create a data center. Just like previous releases, it types it for you. If you want to leave that alone in a home lab, that's fine. Move on down to the data center you just created, and you've got the Add a Host button. Doing the simplest default install possible. For now, I left lockdown disabled, you might have noticed. Okay, there's going to be some further refinement. Show hide columns, for instance. I love to have execution time always shown. See how long things take. And now we have an SSL warning. Say ignore. Okay, that should be it. We've got an ESXi host now presented in our data center and a bunch of data stores to put VMs on and so forth. Might be some refinement you want to do, like open up SSH or auto start that. But the thing I always do before anything else is set the VCSA appliance to auto start. Very important. Notice how I got there. Manage, settings, startup shutdown. Click Edit. I like automatic. I like this setting. And I like the default to be a guest shutdown, a graceful shutdown. Don't just pull the power on it. And then finally move this up to automatic. And click OK. So now if I reboot my ESXi host, which I generally do at this very moment, I'm then comfortable and convinced my entire data center comes up properly. All right. So here's our ESXi host. and it's running all of this workload. If we look under the list of VMs, you'll see this one appliance called VCSA. Its amount of memory that it uses is going to be far less than the 8 gig by default we've given it. Right now it's using 3.7, so I could probably move that down to 4 gig without incident. That's been true in previous releases. This one looks a little more heavy with all that stuff they've added. That's about it. I'm going to now reboot the ESXi host to make darn sure that everything is working great and that everything comes up fine after a reboot. And actually, it's going to break all these windows. They're going to cough up errors. This window is done. And you might remember I have an out-of-band way, a way to see what's going on with the host. Okay, so we should see this host, this ESXi server, .50, rebooting soon. And if after the reboot, probably 2 or 3 minutes after it, I'm able to use the vSphere web client to get back in, I'll feel like I'm good to go. Okay, in the interest of time, oh, maybe I don't need to speed it up. So that's normal. It's complaining because we rebooted, right? You expect some strange behavior. And there goes my host restarting. Now to watch this again is probably kind of boring because you've seen this before. I'm more interested in making sure after it's all done that everything is acting normal. So at this point I'm going to cut to the 2-3 minutes ahead of time to see am I able to reconnect with VCSA. If you end up using Internet Explorer only for connecting to this host, you could do something like this. If you look at our history here, you'll see how we logged in. There it is, vSphere client, right? So we could say, hey, Internet Explorer, use that. Whoops, that didn't work. There you go. Use that as my default page to come up to. So now we've turned Internet Explorer into a vSphere web client of sorts. Even better to use Chrome where you can do application pinning and pin on your taskbar right next to the screen icon. I'll do that in later videos. I've actually covered that in previous videos as well. So ESXi is coming up. Now the question is vCenter auto-starting as well? Remember, we still have the vSphere client, the C# client, to check in on things. And apparently, yes, it's booting up. It's a good sign. We can actually look at it. That's good. You'll see the capacity on the disk it's on and how much is left. So the data The amount of storage it used isn't very impressive, very big. That's good. There's a whole bunch of little drives, but they're all thin provisioned. Okay, you'll notice we point to the IP address of the VCSA appliance. You have a handy icon that tells you what the actual URL is. So that's really what should be bookmarked with the HTTPS. We even have it as our homepage if we want. Okay, so we're in. And I am now convinced that I have a healthy, happy home lab. I thank you for visiting tinkertry.com, where you'll see more videos much like this soon, follow-on videos, with even more technical depth and various techniques covered for how to do your vSphere installation. Particularly, the super guide is what I like to keep up to date with all the latest information. All right, so super guides are ongoing efforts where I take VMware vSphere and I keep adding to it all the latest and greatest information. So that's it. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.